Thanks for being here, everybody. My dad was simply one of a kind, an amazing, unforgettable person. He lived by the beat of his own drum, while still being the most dedicated and loyal family man in the world. Ron got hurt in Santa Barbara playing basketball, and Dad was there 2 hours later. I got food poisoning in college. Dad was there 2 hours later, sleeping on the floor of my dorm next to my bed. He had a brief battle with colon cancer 17 years ago. He gets the diagnosis, cries for a second, and then just says, "Well, we still have to drive to SB to loan Ron my car, so let's go." My dad is pure love. My dad is pure kindness, pure fun. Such a silly, weird, fun human, while also being so responsible and caring and loving and full of wisdom and great advice. An amazing leader of our family. We would have been beyond lucky to have had him even for a year. But to have had him for over 4 decades, we're simply blessed. We are literally floating on a tiny speck in outer space, most of which seems totally devoid of life. We're also lucky to get to experience any of it. But to have someone like Nate Gleiberman in our lives at all, it doesn't get any luckier. He cared about every little detail of our lives, and he followed up on them always. And he didn't just do that for his family and close friends, he did it for everyone. He loved his family immensely, but he also just loved people so much. Even people he didn't know well at all. I received so many messages after this news saying my dad made them feel so welcome and cared about, that he was truly interested in their lives, and he made their anxiety disappear, that after 5 minutes they felt like they were friends for 10 years. My dad loved to tell jokes, often not well. Sometimes they were pretty funny, a lot of times they were not. But he was so adorable in his telling of them, so genuinely excited at the chance to make someone laugh. But when he was just saying what came to his head naturally, my God, he could be hilarious. He made me and my mom and Ron laugh so hard, and I've had countless people tell me the exact same. My dad sometimes lamented he didn't become a journalist or a reporter, and he also had dreams of doing voiceover or being on the radio like he did in college. Well, never one to forget about a dream. My pop got to do some of that in the latter part of his life. He performed on stage at the Hollywood Improv and crushed it. It is on YouTube, it is a must-see. I just search Nate Glebe. Something like that. He got a voiceover agent. He appeared on a Sirius XM radio show. He and Mom were the favorite recurring guests on my podcast, sharing their wisdom with the world. He even appeared twice on my game show, where he even got to take over as host for a minute. These things made my dad happy. He even in the last year or so was 2 times my featured guest on an improvised virtual show I do. And with no improv background whatsoever, he seamlessly improvised comedy for over 2 hours. And we were stoned, by the way. And I swear to you, he outperformed some of the funniest people in the world. And when we were done, he turned to me, and in one of my favorite moments with him ever, he said, "That was the most fun I've ever had." Childlike joy would just overtake his whole face, as it often did. And for a guy who loved to perform but never pursued it, he ended up with fans. Lots of people messaged me that they were fans of his, how funny he was, that they were even nervous to meet him. Hear that, Pop? My dad was at one of my stand-up shows recently, and a fan of his came up to him and told him how funny he thought he was. And Dad immediately turned to my mom and said, "See, he thinks I'm hilarious." But Pop didn't need a stage. If it was ever true for anyone, it was true for Nate Gleiberman. The world was his stage. He would strike up conversations with total strangers constantly. He would always brag about his kids to every server at every restaurant, would make friends in line, would tell jokes to anyone who would listen. And we always loved to sing together in the car at the top of our lungs, no matter how much it annoyed Mom. He cherished my mom. She was his favorite person in the world. He would always privately tell me how beautiful she is. He'd humbly tell me how she's smarter than him, how caring she is, how amazing she is in every way, and how lucky he was to be with her. But truth is, they were both so lucky to have each other, at each other's side almost constantly for almost 46 years. How fortunate to have so much time together with someone. Nothing in the world made him happier than his family. He was the best grandfather, too. Parker and Ollie adore him so much. Not only did he take amazing care of them, but he would do anything to entertain them. Many times, I have video of this, many times he would get down on all fours and act like a dog, just to make the kids laugh. Dad was so excited to tell you his stories that he would often start them in the middle. Making it kind of hard to follow sometimes. He'd start a story with, "So he says to him." Pops looked down. Who says what to who? You're one sentence in and I'm totally lost. But he also had so many amazing stories from his life, he told us. The time he was on the high school basketball team in Bogota, Colombia, and a referee told him he had to take his Jewish star off. And my dad said, "Not unless those guys with the Christian crosses take theirs off." And they all did. Or when someone at his school showed up wearing a Nazi helmet, and my dad told him if that helmet wasn't off by the end of the day, he would kick his ass. That dude's helmet came off. He even had some stories that did not involve anti-Semitism. He told us about how on the basketball team they called him Nate Baseline because of his sick baseline jumper. Ron inherited that, I did not. He so loved to tell stories, and he was so wise. He gave me the most pivotal advice so many times in my life. He lived an amazing life, countless trips, countless memories, holidays, cruises, ping pong matches, wiffle ball games, baseball games, movies, Jeopardy matches, and probably 42 million conversations and 78 billion of my mom's amazing dinners. His sports hero, Sandy Koufax, called him once. Then decades later, he got to meet him face to face. That photo was framed at least 2 times in his office. And if you haven't seen his treasured LA Sports Hall of Fame of an office that Zach mentioned, it is a sight to see. And if you come back to my parents' house after, you can see it. It's like all of Cooperstown in one very tiny room. He was Dodger Blue from when he was 11 years old, all the way to the end of his life. He's been a fan since Dodger Stadium first opened. He took me to the World Series when I was 3. He took Ron and me to games all the time, and even my mom, once a year, as per their long-standing agreement, where she would indulge him by going and be the only person ever to read a book at Dodger Stadium. Ron, Dad, and I got to see the Dodgers win it all in '88 and saw Kirk Gibson's amazing homer live on TV. A home run and World Series that my dad predicted, along with other crazy details like 7 months earlier in a letter to the editor in the LA Times that was later chosen as one of the best of the year. One of many letters my dad had published in the Times. He was so proud of that. He even had a letter printed in Sports Illustrated about how you need a number 32 to succeed in LA sports, which was taken by an author as part of the premise for that dude's whole book on sports numbers. My dad was obsessed with numbers. My favorite of his articles was always this. Back in 1965, I heard Vin Scully beautifully announce the perfect game thrown by number 32, Sandy Koufax. I was 14 years old. I thought it would be something to see one of these historical games in person. As a 40-year-old, I finally did. Coincidentally, it was also thrown by number 32, Dennis Martinez. And even though it was against the Dodgers, it was quite a thrill. I guess if you wait long enough, you can see just about anything. The game was great, and Scully was great. Just for an afternoon, it was 1965, not 1991. And I was 14 once again. That led to my dad receiving a letter in the mail from Vin Scully himself. It said, "Dear Nate, many thanks for your kindness and thoughtfulness. I enjoyed your article very much. Best wishes, Vin Scully." 3 decades later, we were thrilled to see our Dodgers win it again in 2020, after only a 32-year wait. I was so happy to get to share that moment with my amazing dad. I was not always perfect with him. At times I would get frustrated and we would argue. I was responsible for most of those arguments. I could have done better in those moments. But my dad loved me anyway, exactly the same amount. Even in those moments, he would often say, if I drop dead, how would you feel if this was our last conversation? You never think that will actually happen, but it turns out sometimes it does. Whenever I apologized, he would always forgive me instantly. His love was completely unconditional. I always felt it so deeply, and I know he knew how deeply I love him. And I hope he feels it forever, wherever he is. One of his last texts to me was a picture of his little Jackie Robinson statue showing his number 42. I said, send it to Ron. Today is his 42nd birthday. Dad replied, I spread love around. Obviously, I sent it to him too. Well, just a couple weeks later, Pop's last day on Earth was April 15, the day Jackie Robinson made his major league debut. The Dodgers won that game 5-3. Robinson died at age 53. And on my dad's last day, he got to see the Dodgers win one last time. Those numbers might seem like a stretch, but my dad would have liked that. In the very weird way life sometimes works, at this very moment, Dad was supposed to be at the Dodger game with Ron. Instead, right around now, they will be honoring his life. Right under the Jumbotron, it will say, R.I.P. Nate Gleiberman, at Nate Dogg Dodger, #1 Dodger fan since 1962. He loved coaching us in Little League. He loved coaching all the kids. An old buddy on one of my teams when we were kids became Facebook friends with my dad. And just a couple weeks ago, my dad messaged him randomly saying how much he enjoyed coaching him. And he replied how kind my dad always was to him and what a good man he is. Who stays in touch with people they coached 35 years ago? Nate Gleiberman. You'll never meet a more pure soul. He could never even give one son a compliment without immediately evening it out with one for his other son. That's our Pop. And he's one of the most charming people I've ever met, ever seen. That counts any movie star. My dad just exuded charm and likability and pure kindness. He set our family up perfectly. Ron and I owe literally everything to him and Mom. And we and Mom just loved hanging with him so much. I can't tell you the number of messages I received saying that they hope to have a relationship with their son or daughter like Dad has with us. That our relationship inspired them to try to achieve that. Or people messaging that they wish they had that kind of relationship with their dad, but sadly they didn't. If family is everything, and Dad did family better than anyone, then our dad was the biggest success in the world. It's been a bit of a tough time for our family in some ways for a bit. And my dad, like always, was always there to talk on the phone every day, or many times a day. As I always said, the Pop man always rings twice. Or to do anything in his power to make our lives even a tiny bit better. And as things got better recently, my dad got to see his family turning things around and feeling happier. I think whatever was going on in his body, he knew he couldn't leave until that was the case. But he got to see it. And so in a lot of ways, his work here was done. Many of us think my dad knew his time was coming to an end. He started talking about his death all the time lately. Way more than normal, which he did always typically do, but way more than normal. I even had to say to him recently over dinner, Pop, can we please get through one meal without talking about your impending death? Of course, not realizing what would happen just a few weeks later. On our last one-on-one phone call just like a week ago, he told me he needed to tell me where his will was. I got a little annoyed and he said, it's important. What, I can't tell you something important? said, "You're right, Pop, sorry." It wasn't where he said it was. Organization was not his strong suit, but it was close, it was in the area. I got the call from Mom on Saturday night. I was in Costa Rica. I booked the first flight home and chose to leave out the back exit of this hotel. A security guard opened the gate, and in the darkness, I noticed he's wearing a Dodger hat. What security guard ever wears a team hat while on duty, let alone in another country? He tells me he's the biggest Dodger fan ever. I tell him my dad is. He then says out of nowhere, "I'm from Nicaragua, just like Dennis Martinez, who threw a perfect game once." I tell him my dad was at that game. The world is just too crazy sometimes. Then I get picked up at the airport by one of my best friends, Scott, and he points out the car in front of us for almost the whole ride home as a University of Miami Hurricanes license plate frame. Then last night, when posting about the live stream of this service, we accidentally deleted the post about him passing away. No problem, we just went to the trash folder on Facebook to restore it, and it's not there. Inexplicably, it's gone. Like our dad didn't want the last post on his profile to be about his death. It was like he wanted it to be the last one he posted. Just a picture of him, Ron, me, and our cousin Dan on the field at Dodger Stadium with Don Mattingly, and the caption Dad wrote, "Our boy is ready with Donnie baseball for baseball fun." My dad didn't want to get old. He would say it all the time. He'd point out an old man struggling to get around, and he'd tell my mom, "I never want to become like that." To which my mom would reply with her trademark sarcasm, "What a unique opinion." But our dad meant it. He would fight me when I would try to get him to even just set his goal age to live to at a high number. I'd say, "Dad, shoot for 100. He'd say, "What about 80? Old man life wasn't part of his vision. I'm not saying he wanted to leave when he did. These things are largely random, of course, and he was deprived of some wonderful years with us, passing away at 72. That's probably him calling right now. But I'm just saying he didn't want to live to 90. He was a true kid at heart, and kids can't become old men. So while this is tragic, especially to lose him so suddenly, and it's the hardest thing in the world to know we won't ever see him again, it also would not have been his style to slowly fade away. Our dad went out on top, and that's how we'll always remember him, because it's a scientific fact that energy can neither be created nor destroyed, and Dad had so much energy, we will feel him everywhere. That doesn't mean we won't miss him. I will miss you every day, Dad. I love you so much. We all do. Thank you for dedicating your life to us. We'll never forget it. And now it's our turn to dedicate our lives to you.